The Stone Zone with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and you're back in the Stone Zone, the 2025 edition. On behalf of everyone at Worldview Tube and also at Rumble, we want to wish you the happiest and healthiest new year. It is indeed, I believe, a year in which we are on the cusp of an unprecedented period of health, security, justice, prosperity, peace, law and order. Call it the age of Trump, if you will. Spirits are high in the country as people recognize the important transition that is about to take place. Here to talk about that and many other issues is my co-host for today, Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review. Mark, welcome back into the Stone Zone.
Honored to be with you, and Happy New Year to both you and Nydia, Roger.
So, Mark, we were honored to ring in the new year with President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump at Mar-a-Lago on New Year's Eve. I must say it was an extraordinary evening, replete with great music, great people, great patriots, and the president was in a particularly great mood. Mark, how did you ring in the new year?
Actually, I actually just stayed home. Mine was the exact opposite of yours, Roger. It was quiet. I was alone with my dog, and I went to bed before the ball dropped. And so, but I woke up refreshed and ready to start 2025. But I loved seeing all the photos and videos of President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump dancing together with Elon. I thought it looked like a wonderful evening there, and I'm so glad that you and Nydia were there to spend that special evening there with the president and the first family.
Yeah, Senator Ted Cruz was in the house, also Sly Stallone, number of celebrities. It was a great, great evening. You know, normally, this is not my first year being invited to Mar-a-Lago for New Year's Eve, but normally I'm more in your camp. Mrs. Stone and I would stay home with a bottle of champagne, ring in the new year, and then go promptly to bed. But as you know, New Year's Day has traditionally been the day in which I release my 16th annual International Best and Dressed list. This is a tradition that I picked up from the late Mr. Blackwell. He was a Hollywood syndicated columnist and arbiter of fashion, and well, his list could make or break careers, and his list, like mine, had people from all walks of life, not just celebrities, actresses and actresses, but titans of industry, athletes, and so on. My list will drop here shortly due to some computer-oriented problems yesterday. We decided to release it this morning. I was privileged to be on 77 WABC this morning with Sid Rosenberg, one of my favorites. Sid, by the way, making the list himself this year because he is always nattily attired. I think his tailor of choice is Joseph Aboud, but he always looks great. It's his first year on the list. Now, we're going to talk about the list on tomorrow's show. It'll post here almost immediately after we finish this show, so people will be able to see it online. But it's getting harder and harder, Mark, every year to fill out this list. Fewer and fewer Americans, both men and women, really care about how they look when they leave the house. I often wonder whether they even bother to look in the mirror. In other words, the bottom line of this is very simple. You should always dress for the activity in which you are about to engage. In other words, Don't go to a fancy restaurant in workout clothes. Don't go to the gym in a three-piece suit. It's pretty simple, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't follow those basic rules. So we have that to look forward to. I want to talk about the politics of the day, and to join us is what I guess they call an influencer. He is a man who has made great strides on X. I met him for the first time in Phoenix when we were both there for the great Turning Point USA M Fest group. George, I'm gonna mangle this. Bahizzi Tweets, I believe is our guest today and joins us now in the zone.
Well, thanks for having me, Roger. And you did lie in that intro. I saw you in a three-piece suit at the gym. So I think your audience would love to know that. You were definitely wearing a suit while working out.
Yeah, there's no question I was pumping iron while wearing a vest. My friends know better. George, I hope I didn't mangle your last name, but any way you slice it, you become a very important influence for truth and conservative values on X. And for that, I salute you.
Well, it's interesting because I'm hearing that from you. And I've been watching you since I was in middle school in 2015 when President Trump came down that escalator. And I was impressed by how a rich guy, which is what every young boy my age wanted to be, could be so passionate about these things. And I just supported him ever since. I would see your face everywhere. So hearing that from you is amazing. I mean, we're in a new year, 20 days, well, 18 days now, and he's going to be sworn in. I just can't wait. It's going to be a new era, a new start for my generation. And we're looking forward to whatever God has planned next.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I have said repeatedly that I'm looking forward to a new golden age of peace, prosperity, security, and justice. And to that, I add, particularly after the events of yesterday, law and order. The president has an enormous task ahead of him, but I think he's going to be aided by the changes in which people get information. Your success on X is testimony to the fact that new independent journalism is surpassing the tired old legacy media. Let's be candid. People no longer believe CBS, ABC, NBC. They no longer have any confidence in CNN, and to a lesser degree, even Fox, which during the day seems indistinguishable to me when it comes to CNN. But at night, of course, you have a number of great truth tellers still there. But this shift in how people get information was a key to Donald Trump's election in 2016. Had we not had a free, fair, open internet in that presidential year, I don't think he would have been able to win. It gave him a platform with which to counterattack those who would seek to spread false narratives about him and his candidacy. Mark, your thoughts on this exciting new media, because the success of the Illinois Review is just another example of how we are leaving the old media in the dust, and more people are turning to folks like you and George to find out the truth.
You're exactly right, Roger. And what's very interesting is what people, the American people, are beginning to see now is the massive and widespread cover up and corruption of the media, hiding the real cognitive decline of Joe Biden and the fact that in June he was so fit to be president. You couldn't imagine how the decisions that he's making behind the scenes in the Situation Room. And then when he has that horrific debate performance and he's revealed as the real cognitive impaired Joe Biden, the media jumps on the Kamala Harris train. And to be able to make a switch like that at the flip of a coin is just remarkable. And that's why it is so important. Nobody trusts the media anymore. And it's just fascinating to see various platforms and individuals just explode with support and followers because they're actually doing the job of what the mainstream media is supposed to be doing. And that's reporting the news, reporting the truth.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how quickly the story, basically admission, the most significant story, I think, being at the Wall Street Journal, came and went out of the news cycle. I mean, George knew, you knew, I knew that Joe Biden was non compos mentis. We knew he was not well. We know he wasn't really doing the job. Yet, so many people vouched for him. Can we forget that Kamala Harris said that after the debate, the disastrous debate with Donald Trump, that he was, quote, sharp as a tack? Or people kept telling us, no, no, in private meetings, he's really on top of it. I mean, he's asking tough questions. All of that turned out to be nonsense. George, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting what you were saying about the media. I didn't really see what I was doing on X as replacing the mainstream media or the legacy media, as we're calling them now. I never viewed it like that. What I was doing, I thought, was sharing the things I was passionate about, the problems that I thought people should view. So election integrity was the biggest part of what I was doing for since 2021 after they rigged the 2020 election. But I think the moment I realized this is more than just posting on X, this is actually a little bit of journalism, was when I decided I wanted to make everyone pay attention to some of President Trump's older policies. You know, the ones he had to come out with, Agenda 47, when he was banned from everywhere. So he had to post those on Rumble, and no one really saw them. So I went up and found the policies that I thought would serve the people the best and were some of the coolest ideas, like building 10 new cities, all these things. And I just started posting them every single day about a week before the election. And they would take off. I mean, some of these would get 10 million views, 5 million views. And there was one that I was really happy about. It was him talking about how he wanted to make homeschooling as affordable as possible with this tax system. I posted that about 3 days before the election, and it went viral everywhere. Homeschool channels were talking about it. Parents on TikTok were talking about how this would help them. And that's when I realized, okay, it's not just posting things. Now it's you can create a narrative. And that's exactly what the mainstream media does, except they're not honest about it. They don't tell us that they're building a narrative and they're creating a narrative. We on X, Mark, I have a lot of I have a lot of things similar with Mark. We spent New Year's at home. I was sleeping at 11 p.m., so I didn't even feel the new year until I woke up. But we do this telling people exactly what we believe, so no one's guessing. No one thinks we're being nonpartisan and objective. We are biased. We tell people exactly what we're going to do and what we're going to say and why we believe what we believe, and we let the people, the audience, the market decide if they're going to pay attention to us or not.
Well, as you know, I have written a book called Stone's Rules, published several years ago, has a foreword by Tucker Carlson. One of the most important rules is something I learned from former President Richard Nixon. And that is, in politics, the only thing worse than being wrong is being boring. Looking back at your tweets in preparation for today's show, one of the most obvious conclusions you can reach is you are never boring. Your tweets are always informative, factual, truthful, but hard hitting. I think that's why you've had the explosive growth that you've had on X. By the way, it is a competitive marketplace. I mean, so for example, roughly 2 weeks ago, I saw President Zelensky meeting President Trump in Paris when the president-elect went for the dedication of the new Notre Dame Cathedral. And it incensed me that Zelensky looked like he was wearing a dirty sweatshirt. I mean, we've given this guy billions of dollars. He wore a suit and tie when he went to the World Economic Forum to bow down in front of Klaus Schwab, but he couldn't bother to wear a suit when he addressed a joint session of Congress. He couldn't wear a suit and tie when he went to meet the president-elect. I found it to be disrespectful. So I posted about it on X, and the next thing you know, it was picked up by the Associated Press, the New York Post, and a number of others. So instead of the mainstream media leading social media is now leading mainstream media, which I think is a very key development. Mark, your thoughts?
No, you're exactly right. And Roger, what's very interesting is I spoke with Ronnie Jackson, congressman who's also the White House physician under President Trump. And the media, we knew that Joe Biden suffered serious brain aneurysms in the 1980s. Nobody in the mainstream media wanted to report that. They wanted to cover that up. And so what's interesting is, again, the explosion of various individuals like George and many of your tweets, Roger, that go viral is because you're saying the things out loud that people are thinking, but aren't necessarily putting that into a message format. And I think that is extremely powerful. And Roger and George, I can't help but think about that Van Jones interview just recently on that podcast where he talks about why President Trump won. And one of the reasons that he said is because he said he's got an entire ecosystem of news and information that revolves around him, that's always pushing narratives out, dropping truth bombs. And everyday Americans who didn't pay attention before are now paying attention. And again, I think that resulted in why President Trump had such a large mandate on November 5th is because not only has he transcended and realigned politics in America, but he's realigning the mainstream media. And will Fox, will MSNBC, will CNN, will they cease to exist in another 5 years? Who knows?
Well, financially, there's a lot of, I think there's a strong argument to be made that they can't possibly, because unless you happen to be traveling through an airport, you're not going to be watching CNN. I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. And I don't think most Americans put any stock into what they say. This, by the way, reflected in their ratings, the CNN ratings, the MSNBC ratings. They are in the toilet, and there's a reason for that. But the other thing here, before we kind of leave this conceptual discussion and get into the day's news, is I think one of the most brilliant things the Trump campaign did, realizing the opposition of many in the legacy media, and Barron Trump, I think, is accurately given credit for this strategy, was the president undertaking a lot of high profile alternative media podcasts, some of whom, as you know, have millions of followers. This, I think, was strategic brilliance because it allowed him to communicate around the legacy media and reach millions of people who really didn't really know Donald Trump and may have been buying a false narrative about who he was and what he stood for. Now, that's particularly valuable, I think, with the backdrop of Kamala Harris having no positive, uplifting, inspirational plan for America at all. Her closing message, Trump is Hitler, and if you vote for him, you're a Nazi, is not exactly inspirational. So I think that whole strategy of being seen with high profile alternative media podcasters was a brilliant one. And I think it helped contribute to what was not a close election, but was an extraordinarily sweeping mandate for very real change in the country. Let's move to the news. Very upsetting news yesterday, which I think mars New Year's Day. Two horrific bombing attacks, one in New Orleans. The more I read about this, the more sick to my stomach I get. One in Las Vegas. That one's particularly troublesome because clearly the use of a Tesla vehicle, the explosion in front of the Trump Hotel, there's a message there which I think is chilling. And no, by the way, some of the mainstream media have tried to blame the Cybertruck, which is an absurdity. This is an attempt to smear Elon Musk and Tesla, uh, which I find outrageous. George, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting that the media just jumped right to blaming Elon's company instead of actually just looking at it objectively. If you watch every video of Cybertrucks or any other electric vehicle catching on fire with those battery fires, they don't look like that. They don't look like what we saw. At first, we just saw the smoke, and then we saw a different angle. And this is how quick the news was just coming out on X. And then we saw another angle. Then we saw CCTV footage of the explosion. And I think the person, or maybe a group of people behind this, they wanted to send a message. I mean, the media radicalized them for years, or this entire year. They've been calling Elon a threat to democracy right after Trump. So if Trump's the biggest threat to democracy, it's Elon. So what better way than to commit a terrorist attack that involves both of them? They wanted to murder Trump hotel employees in Vegas while using a Cybertruck as symbolism. Now, I have a different view on it. I think it was actually divine intervention that the only person who ended up dying was the suicide bomber, the driver in that car, in that truck. The valet that was right there got injured, probably some big injuries, but they're going to live. No one else got, drastically injured apart from 6 other people. But it was really divine intervention. Also, they were stupid to use a Cybertruck because that thing's made out of steel and it kind of contained the explosion. You could see it didn't like spread everywhere, it went up. So, in a way, their stupidity led to lives getting saved, even though it should have never happened in the first place.
Uh, all excellent points. Mark, what do we know about the commonality of these two bombers? Again, you have to go to the media constantly to keep up to date. I found it shocking that at first FBI officials in New Orleans tried to say that this was not a terrorist attack. It was interesting that Alex Jones was really the first person I saw to identify the fact that the truck bomber had a flag on his trunk. It was clear that the feds tried to mask that so we would not know, but I think we now have enough credible sources saying it was in fact an ISIS flag. This is chilling. It has chilling implications, by the way, for the inauguration. We'll get into that in a minute. But Mark, what do we know about these bombers?
Well, first of all, what's frightening, Roger and George, is that we do not know if there are others involved in the New Orleans terrorist attack. And I believe that there are others involved, and that means that they're still on the loose, and how many of them. But what's interesting is the sort of the common denominator between the terrorist events in both Las Vegas and in New Orleans is the link to these individuals serving in the U.S. military. I think that's really interesting. And to your point, Roger, it is shocking to me. And this is yet another example why it's so important to have Kash Patel at the FBI and Donald Trump in the Oval Office, because think of all the violent and dangerous criminals, members of ISIS and other terrorist organizations around the world who have walked freely into our country through our wide open southern border. And it's not if another terrorist attack will occur on our soil, but when. But it really is remarkable of how the FBI, the federal government, really just tripped over themselves initially with what happened in New Orleans. I saw, George, that you put out a reposted that there was a possible hostage situation there in New Orleans. Was it New Orleans or Las Vegas? And so what's fascinating is that I think this is what's the mainstream media that's literally dying. I think this is what they're trying to play these narratives in order to make it assume like this is Trump related, but they can't, because that we saw the ISIS flag. We see the social media posts of him sympathizing, the killer, the terrorist in New Orleans, sympathizing with ISIS. Roger, can you imagine if this was someone that had a Trump flag on the back of their truck? Do you think the FBI would have been trying to hide that? No, the media would have jumped all over that. And then instead, they're passing over one of the biggest pieces of information that we have. But unfortunately, Roger, and as a civilian in Iraq, I know what it's like to hear car bombs and bus bombs. It's frightening, and I can only imagine the PTSD that those individuals are going to suffer for the rest of their lives. But we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to close our borders, and more importantly, we need Donald Trump. January 20th can't come any sooner.
Boy,
I have
could not.
something I want to add. I want to add this to that. So the FBI, which we entrust with protecting the homeland and preventing terrorism from taking place, we give them the investigative power to go and do that. They are spending more time, the DOJ as well at large, investigating Roger Stone than they are investigating potential terrorists. They're spending more time labeling moms speaking at school board meetings as domestic terrorists than investigating potential terrorists. They're spending more time arresting pro-lifers who protest abortion outside Planned Murderhood instead of actually investigating actual terrorists. If they didn't spend all these years going after J6ers, which, by the way, they're still raiding J6ers' homes, even though it's been 4 years since that happened, they're still raiding people's homes in the name of looking for domestic terrorists, when the actual terrorists were scheming and plotting this entire time. And like Mark was saying, we don't know if there are more people involved. I think they said somewhere between at least 4 to 5 people that were involved in the New Orleans attack. But we don't even know if those people were planning separate terrorist attacks, and those attacks are going to happen any minute. So we don't know these things because the FBI that exists and really shouldn't exist, in my opinion, refuses to do their job. Elon Musk's company, Tesla, had answers for us within an hour of launching an investigation. They knew it wasn't the car's fault. They looked at the cameras. They provided local law enforcement the charging station footage to link to the person that drove it, and they had that person figured out within a day. If the FBI was doing that, we'd be sitting here wondering who and what was the motive.
Excellent point. Before we go to a commercial break for the wellness company, I do want to address this kind of issue which comes out of the events of yesterday. My good friend General Flynn has posted online that he believes that President Trump on the 20th should fly Trump Force One to Andrews Air Force Base, take the oath of office on his plane or at the base under complete protection, then take Marine One, which is the presidential helicopter, to the White House to take office and begin the incredible task of turning this country around. Clearly, General Flynn is worried about security during the inauguration. Now, I've been to 5 presidential inaugurations in my life. I am planning to go to this one, largely because my wife very much wants to go. And really, the only moment that I actually care about is seeing the president sworn in. This is, as you know, something I have wanted to see since 1988. I've seen it once already in my life. Now Trump has staged the greatest comeback in American political history. And yes, that is a tiny piece of history that I want to participate in. But I share the general's concern about Washington, D.C. In the last inauguration, my own granddaughter, wearing a ball gown on her way to the inaugural ball, was pushed pushed to the ground into a mud puddle, actually, by a member of Antifa. Now, she did get back up and completely cold cock him, knock him cold. I think she messed with the wrong girl. He messed with the wrong girl, or the wrong young lady, I guess I should say. But is this a legitimate concern in your view, Mark?
It is an absolutely legitimate concern. I was in Washington just a couple of weeks ago. They're expecting 1 million people. President Trump has already survived 2 assassination attempts. The federal government has been asleep at the switch regarding his security and his safety. We are seeing coordinated terrorist attacks in both New Orleans and Las Vegas. There was a mass shooting, I believe, last night in Queens. Over 10 shot. We have possible hostage situations. We've got terrorists that are already here in our country because of Biden's wide open border policies. Again, it's not if, but when. And the federal government has already proven that they cannot protect President Donald Trump. So I agree with General Flynn. I think there's got to be a scaled down inauguration because the number one priority is to ensure that President Trump safely takes the oath of office. And can he do that effectively in Washington, standing on the west front of the Capitol with all of these threats? I don't think so.
Well, I hope the president will think about this seriously. Let's take that quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with more of Mark Vargas and George, our guest. The holiday seasons are here, which also means it's the sick season. Sinus infection, strep throat, upper respiratory, hacking. Everyone is traveling and passing it all around. But guess what? You don't have to deal with this in this year, folks. Why? Because the little blue case is your mobile urgent care. It has ivermectin, Z-Pak, amoxicillin, and 6 other prescription medications right there at your fingertips. Thanks to the wellness company's medical emergency kit, you can tackle any severe body problem that comes your way without ruining your holiday plans or winding up in urgent care or trying to get an appointment with your doctor. This kit cuts right through the red tape by allowing you to take control of your own health versus being reactive and inconvenienced during this precious family time. You don't need a gatekeeper because their medical board created a guidebook that outlines common treatments for UTIs, strep throat, bacterial infections, respiratory illnesses, and more. It's all it takes is filling out a digital intake form, and your kit will arrive at your door in 1 to 2 weeks. Now you can travel with peace of mind this holiday and all year round. Order your kit now by going to twc.health/rstone. That's twc.health/rstone, and use code rstone to save up to 30% and 30% off and free shipping. I do want to say that this offer is only available to United States residents only. The Wellness Company. These are folks you can trust. I strongly urge you to order your kit today. All right, we're back with Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review, and George. George, pronounce your name for me and tell people where they can find you so I don't mangle this.
Yeah, you had it right. It's Behizzy, and I'm on Behizzy tweets on X. First of all, you said something earlier that I absolutely disagree with. That inauguration needs to happen because I booked flights already. I'm not going to DC to just watch nothing. No, I'm gonna go watch the inauguration. That's gonna be my first ever presidential inauguration. I voted for the first time in a presidential election in 2024, and I want to see the inauguration. If that means the president needs to survive a few more assassination attempts, then so be it. It's God's plan.
I have to admit that I have mixed emotions about it. I mean, I think the president deserves that moment in the sun. He's worked very hard for it. I mean, actually, and I feel strongly about this, his victory is a testimony to his personal resilience, his persistence, his toughness, his stamina, courage. The thing about Donald Trump is that he is eternally, much like Ronald Reagan, he's eternally optimistic, even in the darkest days when they launched this tsunami of lawfare against him. I don't know a single day in which I spoke to him in which he was discouraged or that he was down or that he was depressed. He was always optimistic. He would end every call by saying, "We will win in the end." And of course, he turned out to be right. So, George, I want you to have that experience. At the same time, I do recognize the inherent evil of those who would attack America and those who would do us harm. I'm of mixed emotions. I admit that. All right, let us try to delve a little more into the news. For that, Mark, I'm going to go to you to kind of help us bring us up to date on the events of the day.
I cannot wait for both of your responses to this, because Liz Cheney has been a favorite target of ours for such a long time. I mean, her father made billions of dollars off for sending American soldiers to war and dying. But President Biden is awarding not only Liz Cheney, but the former J6 committee chairman, Bennie Thompson, with the nation's second highest civilian award. The award is known as the Presidential Citizens Medal, and it's generally given to Americans who have, I quote, performed exemplary deeds of service for their country or their fellow citizens. I can't believe not only is Biden pardoning violent murders and pedophiles and people that vicious men that mess with children, but now he's also giving Liz Cheney and the J6 committee chairman the nation's second highest civilian award. It is remarkable to me.
George, I'm going to let you take the first shot at this.
Oh, you know, there's a term, and I love it. It's these people fail upwards. It's like the failed J6 cops who ended up getting promotions after leaving the Capitol. It's the exact same scenario. Liz Cheney and everyone on that committee were derelict in their duty. They failed, they deleted evidence, they committed crimes. The committee wasn't even formed legally, lawfully, and everything else. So the fact that they're getting awards, it's similar to the two women from Bolton County who we saw on video do nefarious things on election night in 2020. I won't mention their names because they sue people, but now they got a Presidential Citizens Award, and they're suing, and the courts are siding with them. It's sick. It's a perverted system. It's a really odd reward to reward Liz Cheney, whose father got us into an endless war, or whose family has just been a neocon family for as long as they've existed, and she's getting an award for existing. It's sick to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can be very specific because this hits home, since Liz Cheney specifically lied in the hearings about myself and General Flynn. Let's be very clear. Liz Cheney suborned perjury by going to the witness, Cassidy Hutchinson, around the back of her lawyer to coach her on a number of falsehoods. Cassidy Hutchinson, who was an aide to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, specifically said that President Trump instructed his Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to contact Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th to, quote, find out what was going to happen on January 6th. I can tell you definitively that no such phone call or communication ever took place. I've actually never communicated with Mark Meadows at all in any mode of communications, other than the fact that I think I met him once in the green room at Fox when he was a congressman, I believe before Donald Trump was even president. Then Hutchinson goes on further to say that Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, was supposed to go to a meeting in a war room at the Willard Hotel, but that she dissuaded him from going. But he later called Stone and Flynn for a download on that meeting. Well, that's the second act of perjury, because I was never in any war room at the Willard. If there was a war room at the Willard, I was unaware of it. The Washington Post has 3 sources that say that I had no involvement in any war room at the Willard. And that conversation between Flynn and I and Meadows never took place. That's just 2 examples of Liz Cheney taking actions that at a minimum should get her sanctioned as an attorney, because she is a lawyer and therefore she knows better. The president suggested a couple days ago that she might face prosecution. And here's my thought on that. And this is something I've been grappling with. We saw John Durham take 5 long years to issue a report on the Russian collusion hoax, reaching conclusions that many independent journalists had already figured out, which was this was the greatest single abuse of a power in American history. It was nothing less than the use of the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agency using 2 pieces of what they knew was fabricated evidence, the so-called Steele dossier, paid for illegally by Hillary Clinton. Her campaign was fined, by the way, for the way they paid for and hid that expenditure, and the false claim that the Russians had hacked the Democrat National Committee, which the government continues to claim but has no evidence whatsoever to prove. It's because it didn't happen. In fact, all of the forensic evidence and expert testimony available would indicate that to the extent that data was clearly stolen from the DNC or from the Clinton campaign, it was downloaded to a portable disk and removed physically from the DNC. So the problem here is that after his investigation, instead of charging the main conspirators that would include, well, you could take it all the way to Joe Biden, but Susan Rice, James Comey, the FBI director, John Brennan, the CIA director, Andrew McCabe, the list of perps here goes on and on. He chooses to indict this attorney, Michael Sussman, the guy at the very, very bottom of the totem pole, the lowest possible guy in the conspiracy. This is like indicting the guy who drove the getaway car for double parking while you let the bank robbers get away. But because they go to trial in DC, where you're guaranteed to get a partisan judge and an all-Democrat or all-Democrat-leaning jury, I'm convinced you could never get a conviction for any of those who perpetrated the Russian collusion hoax. So those who say, I think aptly, that the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the new FBI Director, Kash Patel, both of whom I believe will be confirmed or will end up serving those positions in a recess appointment if the Senate continues to dither, should bring some of those people accountable. The problem is if they go to trial in DC, the facts of the case will not matter. The truth of the case will not matter. I'm not convinced that any non-Democrat, or I should say that any Democrat will ever be convicted in the DC system, no matter how obvious and egregious their crimes, no matter how overwhelming the evidence against them may be. Mark, your thoughts?
DC is 96% Democrat. And so a Republican, I mean, I lived in Washington for 12 years. A Republican isn't going to get anyone in that jury pool to side with them. But again, Roger, we're hearing that President Biden is awarding Thompson and Cheney the second highest civilian award on the heels of President Biden also thinking about issuing preemptive pardons to individuals like Dr. Anthony Fauci, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney. So this narrative that's being created by the White House and this level of protection that they're creating, not just around Hunter Biden and his part, but around Cheney and Schiff and Fauci, you have to think that this strategy is going to backfire with the American people again after President Trump's gigantic mandate just in November.
Yeah, it's interesting. We showed this clip, I think, on our last show last year. I played it on 77 WABC radio last Sunday of Jamie Raskin, probably the single most corrupt and an untrustworthy member of Congress, saying, well, the difference between the pardons that Biden is contemplating, and he's clearly involved in the negotiations because he refers to them as blanket pardons, And the pardons made by President Trump of Roger Stone, General Flynn, and Paul Manafort is those guys actually did something wrong, whereas the people Biden is considering pardoning did nothing wrong. Now, of course, it's exactly the opposite. In my case, we now know and learned only after the fact that the judge withheld exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys. My defense attorneys asked for Robert Mueller's entire unredacted report, and it was denied to us. The judge said that she would read the report in her chambers and she would decide what sections of the report we were entitled to. She omitted from those the section of the report that was only released after a federal judge ordered it to be so, in which Mueller himself admitted that he found no evidence of Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration or any other crime on my part. So what Raskin says here is the exact opposite of what's true. But George, what's even more troubling to me is this blanket pardon for all these people on death row, some of whom committed just heinous crimes, mass murders, vicious murders. There seems to be no rhyme or reason for this, other than some strange ideology. What do you think's behind that?
Well, this is the party that wants to legalize every crime that we know. And I think they know very well these people on death row are going to go back into civic society and commit more crimes. They're going to do more heinous things. And it's the chaos they're looking for. They're looking for chaos. I'll be honest, I don't know why we keep people on death row for so many years. If someone's already there, then you have to do what you have to do and get it done quickly. I don't understand why they get convicted and sentenced to death and then stay there for years and decades sometimes. I never got that part. Maybe someone can explain it to me. But it's the chaos they want. And you know, Democrats never really pardon anyone important. You know, they don't give pardons to Julian Assange, for example, someone I think is a hero in our modern life. They don't give pardons or even consider those to Edward Snowden, even though I mean, both sides completely disagree with what he did, but objectively speaking, I think he did a good thing. He exposed the surveillance state. They never even consider pardons like that. It's just the worst kinds of criminals, child rapist. It's a sick, sick system, but these are perverts. They're perverted people. But there's something you said there that just confirms that our judicial system and our legal system is broken, really just in DC, because everywhere else in the country, even in New York, we saw Daniel Penny get found innocent and freed of all charges. That was a really refreshing moment. And then you look at DC, Michael Sussman's case, one of the jurors knew Michael Sussman's family. They knew Michael Sussman directly or indirectly. But even if it was indirectly, if you just know that your family knows somebody and your daughter is friends with his daughter, you're probably just going to let whatever they did slide. And you just need one juror to be hell bent on their ways. I was on a jury and I sat there for a 3-day trial, and there was nothing more important to me than being objective, because I put myself in the shoes of the defendant and the victim. And I wanted to be the kind of person that would give justice to myself if I was in their shoes. But it's not like that in DC. And maybe the downscaling of the federal government might help DC become a more reasonable city, and the jury pool might get better and we can prosecute people. But until we start addressing the legal system, we're going to have a society built on no consequences for really bad guys. So, and they're not helping by pardoning everyone that did everything evil you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, I can underscore what you say quite simply. The jury forewoman in my case swore under oath during jury selection that she was not really aware of who I was and not aware of my case. And then we learned after my conviction that she had been attacking me on Twitter and Facebook specifically in regard to the case in which she was selected as a juror, but she had those posts on a private setting, so my lawyers could not find them during our due diligence in which we looked at prospective jurors. And even after that was revealed, the judge refused to grant me a new trial, saying that the fact that she'd attacked me and Trump by name, and by the way, said specifically, any supporter of Donald Trump is a racist. Well, that would
Wow.
include me, I guess, or that was not evidence of bias, and she let my conviction stand, which shocked lawyers across the political spectrum. No, there is no Republican, no Trump supporter, no free thinker can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. And this is something the president, I think, is going to have to deal with. Okay, Mark, we have a few minutes left here. Let's move on to the news cycle.
Roger, and George, I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on this because this goes to the point again about how leadership matters. In El Salvador, he talked about going after the real criminals, unlike under the Biden administration where they go after the good guys. When you actually go after the bad guys, you can clear things up. What we've seen, and I think we have a tweet on this, El Salvador hits historic low of 114 homicides in 2024, down from 6,600 homicides in 2015. Again, Roger and George, when you have this type of leadership, strong leadership, communities get safer, and this is your proof. Your thoughts, Roger?
Absolutely true. It is a modern success story. Now, the mainstream media would lead us to believe that Bukele is some kind of a dictator, which is nonsense. If you look how chaotic that country was when he took his position and where they are today is one of the safest communities in the region, also one of the most prosperous in the region. It shows you the effects of strong leadership. By the way, we see the same thing in Argentina, where they told us that if Milei became president, that they would have a recession. But tough policies, tough economic policies, plus tough on crime policies in Argentina are causing an economic resurgence. Just two examples of where strong leadership makes a real difference. This is why I'm so optimistic about President Trump's next term. I do think in a strange way that he will actually be a better president in this term than if he had been, I think, duly and honestly reelected in 2020. The whole experience of being out of power for 4 years and seeing how the deep state tried to use every trick in the book to destroy him has made him a much wiser man. It's why, for example, in this transition, he isn't just focused on who the cabinet secretaries are, which is certainly important, but he's also personally involved in who the deputy assistant cabinet members are. He's actually deeply involved in who the heads of the independent agencies like the SEC or the FCC. And this is good because I think that he has learned a great deal. And look, I don't mean to cast any aspersions on his first term, despite the efforts of many in his own administration, as well as Democrats, to hamstring, to dilute, delay, and derail his agenda. He still already goes down in history as one of our greatest presidents because of his first term. Just think what he can accomplish now in a second term. George?
Yeah, you're so right about that. The first 4 years, he was learning how politics worked. I mean, he says it a lot that he'd been to DC for, a combined 2 days or something like that. And that's not really a long time in the most corrupt town in the world if you're trying to be president of the United States. So he learned a lot, and now he's going to have that wisdom, and he's going to govern like I don't think anyone has ever governed before. The speed that he's going to get things done. He understands all the leverage he can use to get all the rhino Republicans to vote the way they need to. But going to El Salvador, it's interesting that these Western organizations, these human rights organizations, constantly look at Bukele's strategy, the state of exception, and they say things like, oh, it's inhumane what he's doing, arresting all these people. Yeah, those people were terrorizing his citizens, and a leader's sole duty should be to the citizens of his country, the law-abiding citizens of his country. He's throwing those prisoners in jail. They're all sleeping on metal bunk beds at CCOT, which is a prison he spent millions building that houses 50,000 of these gang members. He's doing all those things so that the law-abiding citizens can flourish. And I posted a video yesterday of just life in El Salvador now. It's getting modernized. Companies are moving in. Now, of course, there are people that believe he shipped his gangsters into the United States. That's just wrong. What actually happened was when he announced the gang crackdown and successfully started arresting tens of thousands of gangsters, a lot of them fled to the border. It's funny because they sought refuge here in the United States because we're more tolerant of evil, murderous criminals and have been in the last 4 years. So I think, like Mark was saying, if you solve the problem of crime, and like Roger was saying, if you solve the problem of economy, like Javier Milei is doing in Argentina, all you're doing is giving the people in your country a platform to prosper. And it's just so simple. It's not hard. And if we do that here in the next 4 years, if we start arresting criminals and putting them in jail and going above and beyond to make sure that the founders' vision of a fair judicial system, a fair justice system is realized in the 21st century, then we're really going to be in a golden age like never seen before.
All right. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank my guests. First of all, my co-host, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review, Mark Vargas, but also George of Bahaizi Tweets. We had it up there on the screen. If you're not following George on X, well, you need to. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Folks, if you don't have the opportunity to catch us at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern at worldviewtube.com, well, you get a second chance to catch us on Rumble at 8 p.m. Eastern. In order to do that, please go and download the Rumble app to your cell phone, and then go to rumble.com/RogerStone. Follow us there and set the notification so you don't miss a minute of the Stone Zone. On behalf of my co-host and everyone here at the Stone Zone, let me wish you a happy, healthy, and prosperous 2025. God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?